Professor Namyong Lee's long commentary, The People Power Party will be chosen again. Only when it returns the nomination, power to the people through a full open primary. Regardless of whether a party is ruling or in opposition, its first mission is to discover and cultivate outstanding political leaders and supply them continuously to the nation and society. Its second mission is to refine and maintain the legislation and related legal frameworks required by the nation and society. Its third mission is to conduct parliamentary oversight by auditing policies, auditing the budget and settlement of accounts, and auditing government and public sector investment projects. This commentary begins by examining the first mission, namely the nomination system that supplies outstanding political leaders through a full open primary. Nomination may look like an internal party event, but in reality it is a national personnel system. Depending on whom a party nominates as candidates, a chain reaction follows. What the National Assembly will legislate, what the executive branch will implement, and how local governments will allocate budgets and where they will spend them. When this gateway is captured by a small circle of power and private networks, state affairs are quickly contaminated by the language of deals, and the taxes paid by the people are more likely to be consumed as waste and favoritism rather than delivered as performance. The crisis of trust in Korean politics does not erupt from whether policies are left or right, but from distrust in procedures. OECD data compiled on the basis of 2021 indicates that trust in Korea's central government at the level of high or moderately high is around 49%. In a structure where half of the public cannot feel at ease, even the most plausible promises are easily dismissed as just words again. The lower the trust, the more elections drift away from policy competition and toward emotional confrontation, and the cost of that drift fails to return to livelihoods and growth. Therefore, the first button to fasten for the People Power Party to win the people's choice again is to reform nominations, the starting point of talent. A full open primary that returns the nomination power to the people is a structural reform that changes the party's constitution and the most direct way to restore the party's first mission of discovering and cultivating political leaders. This is precisely why nominations either save or ruin the nation. The most important mission of a party is to discover and cultivate outstanding political leaders and supply them continuously to the nation and society. When this mission collapses, parties survive by hastily fielding outside figures with name recognition every election season, or by pulling up those who have lined up behind internal power brokers. As a result, politics is evaluated not by professionalism and responsibility, but by popularity and loyalty, and the quality of state governance inevitably declines. Nominations determine talent, talent determines legislation, legislation determines budgets and projects determine the people's living costs and insecurity costs. That is exactly why nomination reform is the starting point of all reform. We must see the new relational order created by a full open primary. An open primary is a mechanism that transforms nominations from party property into the people's choice. Once adopted, candidates can no longer survive by lining up behind leadership and factions. They must compete by persuading communities and voters and by undergoing verification. Power changes from a top-down flow to a bottom-up flow. This change reorders relationships among stakeholder groups. Party members cease to be mobilization machines and instead take on core roles in candidate vetting, cultivation, and local policy production. Ordinary voters cease to be passive recipients of choices imposed by a party and become the final arbiters of candidate selection. The press and civil society gain legitimate ground to expand a field not of exposure and emotion, but of verification and comparison. Those who lose are required institutionally to accept the result, while also gaining the protection of fair procedure. However, A full open primary is not a simplistic slogan that says, just open it and it works. If the design is loose, adverse selection and mobilization politics will take over and candidates will compete through agitation rather than policy. Therefore, an open primary must be designed as an operating system that simultaneously secures openness and control, and that operating system must be disclosed transparently enough for the people to accept it. Korea's legal system already presupposes the institutionalization of intra-party primaries, and in particular Article 57(4) of the Public Official Election Act allows certain parties to entrust the management of primary campaigning, voting and counting to the competent election commission, and provides that when the election commission manages the voting and counting, the state bears the cost. However, the election commission's voting and counting process must be transparently disclosed and verified. Reforming nominations through a full open primary is not an experiment outside the law, but a feasible institutional improvement well within the law. Nomination procedures must be simple and nomination records must remain. From the voter's perspective, a full open primary must be straightforward. The flow must be clear. Register, review the verification information, vote, and confirm the result. Complex steps breed distrust among voters, distrust reduces participation, and low participation makes it easier for a primary to be captured again by a small group. In practice, it is stable to standardize pre-registration of the primary electorate. If participation is opened indiscriminately on the day of voting, the risks of mobilization and duplication rise. With pre-registration, controls such as identity verification, duplicate blocking, and anomaly detection become easier. During the pre-registration period, identity should be confirmed with minimal personal information, and the storage and destruction of that information must be fixed by procedure, so it cannot be used for any purpose beyond that objective. At the candidate registration stage, what is needed is not a document-heavy formal review, but a qualification screening that simultaneously checks integrity, conflicts of interest, public ethics, and basic competence. Only candidates who pass qualification screening should be placed on the stage of open debate and policy verification, which raises the quality of the primary. Voting and counting depend on trust. Whether voting is offline or online, auditable records must remain, stakeholders must be able to observe, and the method of producing results must be fixed in advance. Simplicity of procedure, retention of records, and speed of objections are the basics of a full open primary. Candidate qualifications and standards must function as a dual filter of integrity and competence. What the public expects from nomination reform is not new faces, but verified operators. Integrity is the baseline, and competence is the capability to run the nation. If integrity screening is lax, the dignity of public office collapses. If competence screening is lax, the cost to livelihoods explodes. A full open primary must embed a dual filter so it does not degenerate into a popularity contest. Integrity standards must be composed not of emotions but of items: tax delinquency, criminal records, facts related to military service, potential conflicts of interest, transparency of assets and transaction relationships, truthfulness of career and academic claims, and a history of violating public ethics must be minimum verification items. In particular, conflicts of interest are a key driver of the most expensive costs in public office. The moment family, business, donations, or lobbying relationships affect decision-making, policy shifts from the public interest toward private interest. Competence standards must also be fixed as items. Legislative competence must be confirmed by whether a candidate understands the structure of law and budget and can design policy in documents. Administrative competence must be confirmed by whether a candidate can manage goals and indicators in the execution of projects and budgets. Negotiation competence must be confirmed by whether a candidate can coordinate conflicts and create agreements. Crisis response competence must be verified by whether a candidate can make decisions and take responsibility amid disasters, crime and public safety threats, and economic shocks. The core of verification is to force candidates' promises into executable designs. Anyone can shout goals. But when candidates must submit the legal revisions, budgetary resources, allocation of responsibilities among executing institutions, schedules, and side effect controls needed to achieve those goals, the difference between rhetoric and capability becomes immediate. A full open primary becomes advanced only when it is transformed from competition of speech into competition of design. Costs and operations can be solved through state-managed outsourcing and digital auditing. The most common pretext used to oppose a full open primary is cost. But cost is not a reason to say, do not open it. It is a design variable for how to open it. By using the entrusted primary structure provided in Article 57-4 of the Public Official Election Act, it is possible to increase fairness in voting and counting while using a framework in which the state bears the cost. The party's investment should not be in ballot boxes, but in the knowledge work of verification, education, and policy production. Digital technology can also greatly reduce the trust cost of primaries. Identity verification, duplicate vote prevention, anomaly detection, preservation of audit logs, and confirmation of observer records can materially raise transparency. What matters is not the technology itself, but the operating rules. What data is generated, who can access it, when it is deleted, and how external audits are possible must be fixed as rules. Abroad, the core of digital government has been designed as data is connected, authority is decentralized, and records remain. A full open primary can be designed on the same principle. The declaration that a party returns the nomination power to the people can be proven only through transparent operating records. Politics with records runs on responsibility, not manipulation. Ultimately, a full open primary should not be a system that costs a lot, but a system that blocks the politics through which money leaks. When nominations become transparent, the temptation for money politics around nominations declines. When money politics declines, corruption costs fall. When corruption costs fall, the people's taxes are more likely to return as performance. To discuss costs properly, one must calculate not only operating expenses, but also the corruption costs that the system can prevent. Presidential, parliamentary, and local nominations can be unified by one principle. A presidential primary is the process of selecting the top national operator at the nationwide level. Here, the key verification axes are foreign affairs and security, fiscal policy and growth, national crisis response capability, and attitudes toward constitutional order. Nationwide pledges must emphasize resources and execution systems over rhetorical flourishes, and the primary must be a comparison of national operating plans rather than an event of debates. A parliamentary primary is the process of selecting those who will perform legislation and budget oversight. Local representation alone is not enough. Candidates must have the capacity to understand the structure of law and budget, and to assess feasibility and proper execution of projects during audits. Candidates who evade responsibility for central politics under the pretext of solving local civil complaints ultimately harm their own districts as well. A member of the National Assembly is both a representative of the district and a designer of the nation. A local government head and local council primary is the process of selecting operators of everyday administration. Roads, transport, safety, welfare, urban planning, education and care directly determine the people's tangible costs. The reality that turnout in the 2022 local elections fell to about 50.9% is a warning that local politics has moved away from citizens' attention. A full open primary can be a device to raise citizen participation in local politics, while also serving as a training ground that demands strong competence in budget and project management. Even if the office differs, the principle is the same. clarify the function of the office, verify competence as items aligned with that function, and enable the people to choose by looking at the comparison table. Nominations must be a matching of function and responsibility, not emotion. Maturity means expanding advantages and controlling side effects. The advantages of a full open primary are clear. The legitimacy of nominations increases and competitiveness in the general election rises. The efficiency of factional politics declines and the incentive for candidates to persuade the people strengthens. Entry barriers for youth and newcomers also fall. When nominations become competition rather than allocation, parties can return to being organizations that cultivate and verify talent. But side effects are also clear. There are risks of adverse selection, organizational mobilization, celebrity bias, and primaries turning into arenas of populist competition. If the system is abandoned because of these risks, nominations will continue to be traded in closed rooms. The advanced solution is to acknowledge risks and design control devices. Pre-registration, identity verification, duplicate blocking, mandatory debates, fiscal and execution verification of pledges, spending caps and transparent accounting, and election commission entrusted management can be combined as firewalls. In the United States, primaries vary by state, mixing open and closed formats, and low participation has long been criticized. The reason claims of only around 20% participate on average persist is that participation incentives are weak, information costs are high, and competition is often limited. This is not a basis for opposing a full open primary. It is a lesson that design to raise participation is essential. A competitive structure that attracts participation, comparable information provision, voting convenience, and trust in procedures must all be present at once. A full open primary does not end as a one-time event. Primaries gain vitality when a party becomes a platform that constantly trains talent, produces policies, and solves local problems. A system does not shine alone, it shines together with the operating capability and culture that support it. There is a path that persuades progressives, moderates, and conservatives at the same time. The key to persuading progressives is participation and fairness. When nominations become the citizen's choice rather than the power of a small circle, the opportunity structure of politics changes. Pathways widen for civic society leaders, field experts, youth, and women to enter. Persuasion means building a structure in which the vulnerable can enter the power structure, beyond simply claiming to protect them with words. The key to persuading moderates is procedure and predictability. Moderates do not rely on a party's emotions. They look at whether rules are public, standards are consistent, and results remain as records. When nominations are transparent, moderates can conclude that, even if that party governs, it will not be unstable. Moderates vote not on ideology, but on anxiety, and anxiety is resolved by procedures. The key to persuading conservatives is responsibility and the stability of state governance. If a full open primary degenerates into a popularity contest, the conservative strengths of responsibility and order collapse. But when combined with a dual filter of integrity and competence, verification of policy execution, and assessment of crisis response capability, it strengthens the modern conservative identity. The rule of law and order are not slogans, they arise from procedures that restrain power and from operating capability that takes responsibility. The People Power Party will be chosen again not through a louder voice, but through a more sophisticated system. It must return the nomination power to the people and institutionalize procedures, verification, and records so that nominations operate fairly. It must revive the party's first mission of cultivating and supplying leaders, elevate its second mission of legislative refinement into executable design, and restore its third mission of oversight into real responsibility for budgets and projects. Create rules for a full open primary that the people can accept, operate according to those rules, and disclose operating records. The moment nomination power is returned to the people, the party begins to fear the people and only a party that fears the people can discipline itself. That discipline is the path to strengthening the nation's security and competitiveness. Citizens, you must truly awaken for the nation to live. Thank you for watching Professor Namyong Lee's long commentary.